In today's video, I want to talk to you about the difference between the French knot and the colonial knot. Hi, I'm Kim Jamieson-Hirst of Chatterbox Quilts, and I've been diving into hand embroidery lately and discovering all kinds of wonderful stitches, and I really like using French knots, and then I've discovered the colonial knot as well. Now they look kind of similar, but they are definitely made differently, so I want to show you how to do that today. Now the first thing I want to talk about though is the kind of needle I'm using. So I'm using a number 3 milliner's needle. Milliner's needles are great for making knotted stitches because the eye of the needle is the same width as the shaft of the needle. So it means that when you're pulling down through your fabric with this knot attached to your thread, the needle goes through it easily, and so it doesn't get hung up on it, which can happen sometimes if you're using a needle where the eye is bigger than the shaft of the needle. So that's the first thing. It makes a big difference. Okay, so second thing is, how do you make these stitches? Well, good question. So let's look at the French knot first. So you come up from the back of your fabric, and I have a knot in my thread right now. You don't always use a knot, but today I did put a knot in just so I won't continue to pull too far, right? And then you're going to take your thread and you're going to wrap it around the needle. Now, I'm going to talk about this later, but right now I'm wrapping it around just twice, okay? And I'm putting tension on that thread with my left hand, okay? I'm right-handed. Now I'm going to kind of hold that thread that's on the needle a little bit as I go back down into the fabric, close to but not exactly through the place I came up. And then we are going to just gently pull down and it forms a knot on the surface of the fabric, okay? So that's a French knot, okay? I'll do it again for you. We're going to do a little line of French knots here, coming up. We're taking that thread and wrapping it over a couple of times, keeping the tension with my left hand, hang on to it a little bit with my right before I go back down, still keeping this tension on, and I'm going back down and pulling down, and we get another French knot. Okay, so that's the French knot. Now, what about the colonial knot? Well, good question. Let's do that. You come up again. This time it's a little different. I keep my thread up away from me and I put my needle underneath it, okay? Underneath, all right? Now I'm taking the thread and I'm bringing it towards me, still underneath the needle, but you can see it's moving up towards the eye of the needle, okay? And I'm winding it. I'm holding it with my index finger, winding it over. So it forms, it's hard to see here, it forms a little figure 8. Then same thing as the French knot. I'm going to pull that top thread, a little bit of tension on that, and go back down through my fabric, and we have a colonial knot. Now, hard to see the difference in them at this level, okay, because they're very small. But if you get closer, you can see there's kind of a more of a knotted look, a twisted look sort of, to the colonial knot than the French knot, okay? Let me do that again. By the way, I'm working with an 8 pearl cotton here. Okay, so we're going to go underneath, and then we're going to come towards me, towards the eye of the needle, and go over and under again. Okay, and then you're going right back down, and you are going to keep that tension on. Sometimes I just hold it against my fabric like that, and there we go. So, the one thing I noticed with the French knots, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more, but one thing I noticed with the French knots is they aren't always kind of perfect looking. They're kind of imperfectly perfect, if you will, okay? The colonial knots look much tighter, kind of, they sit up a little bit better than the French knots, but they're both really interesting designs, right? And they're both knotted designs. All right, so this is with the 8 pearl cotton. Now, something else that you should consider just with any stitch you're doing is using different threads and how that looks, okay? Because if you use different thicknesses of threads, different fibers of threads, your designs will look, or your stitches can look a little different. So I'm just going to leave that there for now. And now I'm going to pick up a, this is embroidery floss. There's only 3 strands of embroidery floss. So let's take a look and see what my French knot looks like when I'm using this, okay? It's going to look fairly similar, I think, to the number 8 pearl cotton, but a little bit different maybe. And it's going to be in the size, okay? So it's a little bit smaller. Let's do another one here. Up, twist that thread. And of course, practice makes it a lot easier in making any kind of stitch, right? Practice makes improvement, right? Okay, so there we've got our French knots. Let's try our colonial knots. Okay, we're going to put that thread out of the way, go underneath, come back towards me, over the top, Again, practice makes it a lot easier. The first few times you do it, you're like, what? I'm almost losing my thread. There we go. And we'll come up and try one more time. Let's not come up there. We're way too far away. There we go. Okay. Under, towards me, over, keeping that tension on, and back down again. And yes, talking to myself often helps. Okay, let me just move this out of the way here. Okay, there we go. Okay, so there we go. We got those done. All right. Now, what about using an even thicker thread? So here I've got, I think this is 6 strands. Yes, 6 strands of embroidery floss. So let's see what this looks like. So you're going to see that this is going to be a bigger French knot. At least it should be, right? I don't know if it's going to be twice as big, but a bigger French knot than what we had before. Okay, so you can see that that's a lot bigger than the other ones. Now I'm just going to, I've still got my needles attached back here. I'm going to take those off. Make sure we get the right ones off. There we go. Okay, so let's try that again. Just see what that looks like with the French knot and 6 strands of embroidery floss, only going around twice. I'm getting caught up in my threads behind here. All right, there we go. Okay, let's try the colonial knot with the 6 strands of embroidery floss now. Okay, get over, towards me, around, and back down. Again, this will make a bigger knot. Yeah, definitely bigger, right? So if you want them to stand out more, now use a thicker thread. Whoops. Get myself confused. There we go. That's why I have to talk to myself, right? Talking to yourself is definitely allowed when you are doing this type of work. Okay, so there we go. I'm struggling at the back a little bit here. There we go. Okay. So that's what those look like right now. So one of the differences between these knots, of course, we talked about the colonial knot forming that figure 8. So it's basically wrapped twice around the needle and then you're done. That's all you can do with that stitch, right? But the French knot has some other options. So with the French knot, you can actually wrap the thread around the needle more than just twice. So if you wanted to do that, you could come up here and you could wrap it around, let's say, well, let's do 3 times. I've got some pretty thick thread on here right now. And then you want to go back down further away, maybe even than where you initially came out. So we're going to go back down there again, keep some tension on there, pull it through, because it'll get to a point where it gets really hard to pull through because you got too many strands on there, right? So you can see how much bigger that is with 3 times around. Let's try 4. See if I can do that. 3, 4 times around. Go back down again, and I'm not holding the tension quite as tight because of all those wraps on the needle. Makes it hard to pull through. If I can get it to come through, he's not being very happy. There we go. There we go. All right. So you can see with these ones, I wrapped this one more around than this one, but this one looks bigger, just how it formed. But as I said, the French knots are not as perfect, as symmetrical looking as the colonial knots. But you can make them bigger than the colonial knot. So the colonial knot size is determined by the width or the weight of the thread that you're using, right? So if we go from a 8 pearl cotton to 3 strands of embroidery floss to 6 strands of embroidery floss, that's about all you can do with the colonial knot. The French knot, similar, but you can also make it bigger by wrapping it around the needle more times than, say, just twice. So I hope you found that helpful and that you'll try and experiment with these 2 knots in your next embroidery project. And if you're wondering about more hand embroidery stitches, don't worry, I got you covered. Check out this video that has all the important information you need. And for more helpful quilting information, be sure to go to my website at www.chatterboxquilts.com.